Welcome to Classical Ideas. This is Greg Soden. As this show moves towards its 200th episode, I've had a fantastic time reconnecting with friends who appeared in some of the earliest episodes. Back on episode 37, I had a chat with the documentary filmmaker Yujiro Seki to discuss his in-production film, Carving the Divine. My conversation with Yujiro led me to befriending Japanese Buddhist art scholar and curator Michael Van Hardingsveld, who has appeared on the show as a guest on 3 occasions and as a guest host on episode 175. My friendship with Michael led me to chatting about Gyotaku fish printing art with Dwight Huang on episode 92. This podcast overlaps with Yujiro's own Carving the Divine TV YouTube discussion show, where we share guests like the Nibiru artist Rima Fujita, Lion's Roar editor and picture book author Andrea Miller, Rinzai Roshi Mado Moore, as well as my own appearance on Carving the Divine TV to talk about teaching and religious literacy. I share so many connections with Yujiro, and it's just fabulous. So it is a pleasure to have Yujiro back on the show for episode 181. In our chat, we discuss his Carving the Divine documentary in great detail. We go into depth about the life of Busshi sculptors, and we had an absolutely wonderful time hanging out again after a while. I spoke to Yujiro from his home in Japan, where we navigated a roughly 13-hour time difference. If you want to follow Yujiro's work and his film career, you can find him on Twitter at Carving Divine, or at carvingthedivine.com. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at classical_ideas. So without further delay, please enjoy my conversation with return guest, the filmmaker Yujiro Seki. Yujiro Seki, welcome back to Classical Ideas.
Thank you for having me, Greg.
It's a delight to have you back on the show. For those who don't know who you are, can you just give a brief introduction of who you are for the audience?
Well, I am a Japanese filmmaker who made a documentary about the Buddhist sculptors of Japan, which is a 1,400-year-old history. But we're not going to talk about the history in this documentary. We're going to talk about the people who actually do the practices of carving Buddhist statues in the 21st century.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we've spoken about this a little bit in the past. When we spoke in early 2018, you were still working on your film, Carving the Divine, which I know now has been completed. But before we dive into the film, I'm also curious about another project which you do. I do a podcast. You do sort of like a video YouTube talk show, discussion show called Carving the Divine TV. And I was recently a guest, so thank you for having me on your show. But your show is an interview format aimed at education. Can you tell me a little bit about your side project show, Carving the Divine TV, for anyone who wishes to learn about it, so they can keep that in the back of their mind as we move forward in our conversation today?
Of course. Yes, Carving the Divine TV started as a kind of selfish project. So, what I mean by that is when I completed the documentary, to me, it was a beautiful accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I was like, wow, I was able to capture the life of a unknown world to the Western people and even to the people in Japan. So, I was so excited about it. And, I told everybody this is what I did. And everybody thought I was crazy. Everybody thought, why you are so thrilled about the movies about the movie about the statues.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it, and nobody knows about this culture. And if nobody knows about it, why people think it's important, So I realized in order for people to appreciate this culture, we have to take it by step. So one of the reasons that I started doing Carving the Divine TV is to introduce the basic concept of Buddhism and the history of Buddhism. Because ultimately, the movie that I want to promote is about Buddhist art, the tradition. By the way, you don't need to be a Buddhist, or you don't intend to be a Buddhist, but in order to understand the cultural background and why it's important, I thought it would be important to introduce something about Buddhism. So we start from that India, of course, and zooming into Japanese Buddhism, because Japanese Buddhism is often not so understood by many people around the world. So I started doing this, and eventually I started inviting practitioners from a Buddhist tradition, especially Japanese Buddhism, and eventually I invited a Buddhist art scholar to talk about the Buddhist statues. So in the end, it comes all together and enhance the understanding of this art. That was my original intention.
Yeah.
But as I started doing more and more, things got more serious, and more serious people came, and we talk about something profound. At the same time, it's easy for people who don't know anything about it to understand. So this is my side project, Carving the Divine TV.
It's so wonderful because you and I have many mutual friends, like people who have appeared on my show have also been on your show. So I've really liked seeing your show because you have the full video format and I have the full audio format. So it's just really cool to see people who have a similar mission of educating about basic religious traditions around the world and then going deeper and deeper and deeper into them over time. So that's what I love about your show. It's really, really a cool project, and you've had some amazing guests.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And, I don't have any favoritism. I don't have any intention to promote particular kind of Buddhism.
Right.
So that's why I think I can bring all the people together, because as soon as I start favoring one sect to the other, my intention will change.
Right.
So I try to be as objective as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I approach my show too. So it's nice to hear that we kind of have that in common, where it's just all about curiosity and learning and, seeking to expand our own understandings as we go through the show. And then as we learn more, our audiences can learn more too, which is so fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get on to Carving the Divine, the film. You appeared on this show in episode 37 to talk about this, and you already have given a brief overview that this film highlights and profiles the lives of these sculptors making these Buddhist statues. And this is a fantastic film, and I've had the opportunity to see some of it. But the film is essentially on pause for the moment while the world recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you tell me a little bit about what you would have been doing this year in 2020 with the film if the pandemic hadn't happened? What were your plans this year?
Well, 2020 got started pretty well. I got accepted to several film festivals, including the one in Japan, which is one of the most prestigious film festivals in Japan. And I was very excited to be able to show the film there, but unfortunately it got canceled, and more film festivals got canceled, and I was like, oh my gosh, what I'm gonna do? I have to keep going with this path a little longer.
Yeah.
So ideally, I would be going to more festivals and really thinking about how to finally distribute the film at this point, if it wasn't a pandemic. But life throws curveballs at us, and what happened is, I decided to do Carving the Divine TV again. Because I stopped doing Carving the Divine TV for a while, because it was impossible to do it while I was doing the festival. So I just wanted to finish my unfinished job at this moment.
Gotcha. So were your film festival appearances pushed back a year to 2021? If you were accepted into a version in 2020, was that just delayed for the following year?
Most likely not. Many of the festivals, they're just canceled.
Oh my
But
gosh. So
yeah,
are they going to do again? Are they going to do again in 2021 though?
yes, but I'm not sure if they're going to choose my film again. That's another thing.
So you have to resubmit.
Pretty much renegotiate since they know
Wow.
about it already.
Wow. Yeah, that is it's amazing the effects that this pandemic has, and it's like these unseen effects. Like I'd imagine that a lot of people listening wouldn't think about the world of film festivals and filmmakers and documentarians and how this pandemic and all of the canceled festivals would impact the lives of creative folks like filmmakers. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Yeah. Well, okay, so this film is absolutely wonderful, and I know that people are going to be very excited to see it whenever you manage to, reconfigure your approach for how you get the film distributed. But you made a film about a small peek into the world of Buddhism in Japan. Just real quick though, did you grow up Buddhist by chance?
Well, when you talk about that, we got to talk about how the situation is in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
We are mainly very secular.
Mm-hmm.
We are very open-minded. So this means we don't particularly practice religion, but we are affiliated to religion.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for example, we say we are Buddhist, but do we know a lot about the Buddhism? Well, we just need a temple when somebody dies.
Gotcha.
So in that sense, yes, I guess I was a Buddhist, but and my father is a Buddhist furniture maker, Buddhist outdoor maker. We grew up in the environment. We heard about a lot of stories, but at the same time, we are not really conscious on if we are Buddhist or not.
Mm. Well, that's really interesting too, because I know that in the United States, people classify themselves as a certain religion based on what they do, but people don't really realize around the world that, people in different countries can be like multiple different religions at once. They don't really realize the way that, things are practiced differently. So I think that seeing inside the lives of religious practitioners in other countries is a profound experience for many American listeners who see religion as going to church, sitting in a pew on Sundays, and things like that. You know what I mean? Like the religious expression around the world is so different.
Yes, it's not black and white.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like Japan has a long tradition and history of Shinto,
Mm-hmm.
and the Shinto always lived side by side with Buddhism. Of course, there are some exceptions in the history, but we're not going to talk about that today.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that because of this flexibility, Japanese people have a tendency to accept religion from different cultures, like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. We don't really discriminate so much. We accept it. If we what is right religion, what is not right religion, that's not that question that we ask.
That is so interesting. I love that you said that because, thinking about what's right and wrong is often a very binary, black and white choice. But it's nice to hear when other countries don't really see it that way. I enjoy that perspective myself. So, okay, so we have these profiled sculptors in this film doing something called Busshi sculpting. I'm curious if you can just say what Busshi sculpting is and then how you first discovered it as a person yourself.
Well, Busshi sculpting is a 1,400-year-old tradition in Japan. It was set like in the middle of the 7th century or so. It came from China or Korea. And initially, it was just imitation of Chinese or Korean counterpart. But around the year 1000, the famous sculptor Jiro showed up and started making something very Japanese, Japanese Ryo style. And along with other reasons, Japan did not have a strong political tie with China anymore and such. But yes, from then, Japanese Buddhist statuary style developed. And modern day sculptors, what they basically do is to keep the tradition from the ancient time. Around year 1200 or so, Japanese statuary style is established. Of course, there are a lot of exceptions and all this. So when we talk about a generalization, we always have to talk about the exceptions. But the idea is to keep the tradition and to make the icons that are familiar to us. It's not really a self-expression, not like Michelangelo's or David.
Right.
So that's a Buddhist Busshi tradition.
Excellent.
So my film is about the 21st century Busshi tradition.
Yeah. How did you discover the artists and the sculptors that you profile in the film? How did you discover this, as a documentarian?
Okay, yes, I forgot to answer that. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
So, yes, basically, I grew up in this environment, which means basically my father was a Buddhist furniture maker, outer maker, as I told you.
Yeah.
And ever since that I was little, I was surrounded by Buddhist objects, furnitures, altars, statues, tablets, and all sort of good stuff. But when I was a little, I didn't think of it. It was just a family business.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, I got into filmmaking and made my first film, and I really loved it. And I decided to go to the United States and study cinema, because at that time I thought, to be a good filmmaker, I had to go to the United States. So as I was going through my journey of filmmaking, after graduating from a university, working in the film industry in Los Angeles, I met different people from different cultures, and I saw myself as a Japanese for the first time in my life, which is very weird.
Yeah.
Because, in Japan, everybody is Japanese.
Right.
So we don't really consciously think, oh, I'm Japanese.
Right.
But when you go to the United States, people see you as a Japanese.
Yeah.
And, you see different people and the different cultures and different art. And I saw the environment that I grew up in was something that was very unique for the first time in my life. So that's how I started thinking about doing Carving the Divine. At that time, of course, I didn't have a name, Carving the Divine. But so I talked to my father and my brother and everybody that I know, and they gave me some connections. So it was very easy for me in a way because everything was already set up, and I had a knowledge, some kind of knowledge about this culture before. And I thought, this is something that I can only do it. It's not like anybody can walk in and capture this beautiful tradition. So, everything kind of came together. And I just decided to embark on the journey.
Well, it's so amazing, because I was thinking as I was watching this film, I was like, how do filmmakers gain access to the subjects and the people that they film? I mean, I couldn't just walk in and be like, hey, I want to make a documentary about you. Do you know what I mean? Like, it had to be you. It had to be a special person who has a connection to that world already. Otherwise, if I walked in there with a camera and said, "Hey, I want to make a documentary about you," they would just say, "Beat it." You know what I mean? Get out of here. So that's so cool. That backstory is so important, you know?
Appreciate it. And also, as you probably saw, you saw the fire ceremony
Yeah.
ritual, right?
Yeah.
So inside of the area, praying area, you're not supposed to go inside unless you're a monk. But I was be able to go inside because of the connection with my
Amazing.
father. So yes, basically I was meant to make this.
Yeah, I agree. Well, where did you film this? Because I know that you're in like a studio, like a Busshi studio, essentially, with like a team of sculptors. Like, where in the world did you film this?
Well, we go back and forth between Tokyo Prefecture, Toyama Prefecture, and Gunma Prefecture.
Okay.
So it's not only in one spot. People move around.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you travel, like, how do you travel on trains or in cars? Like, how do you get all your gear from place to place?
It depends. Sometimes I took a train, sometimes I took a bus, and sometimes I was fortunate enough to get a ride.
Excellent. Well, were you readily accepted by these sculptors when you were making this film? Like, was there any conflict at all, or did they just completely accept your presence?
Well, any film you make, there are many conflicts, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So this film was not exception. So they are doing the serious work. So if the guy is just shooting what they're doing all the time, they feel uncomfortable, of course.
Sure.
So initially, they're kind of wary about it, but I was there so much, so they finally accepted. They just let it be.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah.
and as an American English speaker watching this film, so this film is entirely subtitled in English from Japanese. I was curious about the translations. Did you personally do all of the translations for the subtitles yourself?
That's a good question. So there are two parts. Initial translation, of course, I had to do it by myself.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get the main point across. But unfortunately, I don't speak English as a first language.
Mm-hmm.
So I had somebody super competent, who's been friend with me for a long time from a University of California, Berkeley,
Mm-hmm.
English major, and a very excellent writer. So he was able to retranslate it into a language that Western English speaker can identify and understand it better.
Excellent. That's really cool, because it reads very smoothly as a viewer for myself as well. And I found myself so captivated by the images that sometimes I forgot to read the subtitles, so I would have to rewind and like watch what I missed in the terms, but because the visuals are so powerful as well. But in the film, there are these many different forms represented in the carvings. And people think about Buddhism and they think of the Buddha. And if you know a little bit more about it, you might think of like wrathful deities like Fudo Myo. What are some of the represented deities that you learned about during the filming that maybe were new to you?
Well, again, we are kind of grew up in this culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it means we are familiar with somewhat these deities. So it's hard to say what I knew and what I didn't know, especially during the time that I was filming. I was not so conscious on what this deity represents and all this, because that's not ultimately the most important thing. So, for example, there's a part that Master talks about the different deities and what they represent. But at the same time, yes, I knew something about them. Like, for example, there's a Emma statue.
Mm-hmm.
Emma is the gatekeeper of the hell. And when I was a little, I was told, if you lie, when you die, the gatekeeper of the hell is waiting in front of the gate, and he's gonna take your tongue out if you lie. So I was scared of this guy, but I understand as a Westerner, maybe people are not familiar with this deity. So these kind of things are everywhere in this documentary. But what I didn't know about, which I learned about it later, is symbolism of these statues. Like for example, there's one statue called Lemon Head Kannon, because it has a Kannon is a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is the something that he or she's going to be a Buddha in the future, but she delays being a Buddha for the time being to save all the creatures in the world. That's a bodhisattva. Excellent. So this bodhisattva has 11 head. Yeah. And I didn't think about why they have 11 head. And later I realized again this has many stories, and some people might say this is right, this is wrong. I'm not gonna talk about what's right or wrong, but one I can't say 11 head represents stages of a bodhisattva path. So 10 stages of bodhisattva path is the bottom one, all the different phases. And the top one, it's Amida Buddha, is the one that, finally reaching enlightenment. So that's very interesting.
Absolutely.
That's I didn't know. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that, because, you go into it as a filmmaker unaware of what you don't know. And then you learn something new and you're like, oh, how fascinating. I'm so glad I got to have that experience where I learned something new while I'm making this project. It's wonderful. I love that. That's my favorite part about doing this show, is I never know what new thing I'm going to learn. Okay. So I want to talk about a little bit about the master-student apprentice relationship. So there's a captivating scene in the film where a young man in a suit is being interviewed about becoming a Busshi, and it is translated as being a profession. So is Busshi more of a profession and a career path as opposed to a spiritual endeavor?
Well, again, in the past, I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
It could be more spiritual path than career.
Mm-hmm.
Bushis were basically the government hired Busshi to commission many statues. Nowadays, Bushis have individual like workshops and such, and if you don't get a commission, you're out of work and you cannot feed yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a career. So they will make you anything that what you ask for. But at the same time, to be able to make truly spiritual art, of course, there has to be some kind of a understanding about the spirituality. But the skills first. If you don't have a skills, you have nothing. So that's Excellent. The idea. Yes.
Excellent. Well, I'm curious about who buys the work of a Busshi. So you just mentioned that they'll make you anything. I cannot imagine that these are cheap to purchase. Are works curated and specifically made to order by the person who purchases the Busshi sculpture, or do the Busshi just make whatever they want and then sell it?
Well, traditionally speaking, it's a commission based.
Okay.
If you want something, you ask for a Busshi to make one, and they'll customize the statue for you. So that's a traditional sense. Of course, there are many people who makes many statues. Also, like Busshi is constantly making their own artwork because they want to make their own collection. So it's not easy to answer this, but at the same time, mainly what they do during the daytime is they make statues for the customers.
Excellent. Well, and I thought about your example of Enma a few minutes ago, and throughout the film there is a custom-made Enma head which the Busshi sculptors make. And I was curious, like, do almost all Busshi sculptures end up in temples and shrines around Japan?
No.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
Of course, there are many statues end up in temples.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, Japanese people have a long tradition of housing the statues in their houses. So for example, I told you about my father being a Buddhist automaker,
Mm-hmm.
Buddhist furniture maker. We say it's a Butsudan. So in the Butsudan, many people put statues. So, it's integral to Japanese culture. So it's not only temples, but many individuals have Busshi statues.
Mm. Well, and what's so interesting about the film as well is that in the film, at one time, one of the Busshi sculptors says you should try to market your work abroad, as outside of Japan as well as inside Japan. And that got me thinking about some of our mutual friends, like in American Zen, like like Mato Moore, for example, like who has a monastery in Wisconsin. And I was thinking, like, wow, I wonder if any of these Busshi sculptures, or like, for example, your father's Butsudan altars, if they would wind up in like American monasteries as well. Does that make sense?
Of course, it's possible, but when it comes to furniture, I think the smaller ones, it's easy to export, but the big ones are very hard to export.
Mm.
But
Gotcha.
I know that many people, even personally, who want Busshi statues.
Yeah. I mean, I want one, I was like, whoa, I want one of those. That's so cool.
Yeah, so if you want one, so I can find you somebody who can do it.
Wow, amazing. It would probably cost me a small fortune as well. Tell me a little bit about the flow of the movie. Do you see this film as having like distinct sections? Like, what was your editing process like?
Well, editing process was very difficult, incredibly difficult. I had 12, 13, 14 gigabytes of footage. It was a collection of 5-6 years of my hard labor,
Mm-hmm.
visual labor. And again, it is a very complex, profound culture. And I didn't want to tell a simple story, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So simple story means often people say there's a girl, apprentice girl, in the beginning of the movie.
Right.
And you want to see her from the beginning to the end. But we don't see her that much. We see her a little bit like toward the end, if you notice her or not. But the film was not about her. But ordinarily, what filmmakers do is to focus on one person and follow this person till the end. But I decided go through the films by stages. There are beginner, novices, and there are like intermediate. There's a master, and there's a grandmaster. In this way, people can get richer experience. People can get a richer experience, and also the protagonist is almost like a guild.
Mm.
And I think for Westerners, you're not used to watching something that doesn't have a definite protagonist.
Sure.
But the Japanese culture is a very collective culture. So people work together. So in that way, the film also represents the culture itself.
Excellent. Well, I loved this idea. So let's focus a little bit on this Grand Master, Korin Sato, a Grand Master of Busshi. Tell me a little bit about, because he's kind of like the figurehead of this small group of Busshi sculptors that you are profiling and featuring. Tell me a little bit about the Grand Master, and then we'll break down the rest of the guild.
Okay. The Grand Master, Master Saito, is a legendary Busshi, and he was originally carving a different kind of a thing. He was carving panel, two-dimensional panel, and he was really good at it, and he really loved what he was doing. But around the age of 30 years old, he went to Kyoto and saw Buddhist statues, legendary statues, ancient work of like a masters. And he was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. And he decided to leave everything behind and decided to enter into the Busshi world. So that's how he started. He's one of the few people who can do panels and the statues at the same time.
Excellent.
Very few people can do both.
So who were his students? Tell me a little bit about his lineage of apprentices that he's trained over the years.
Oh, so you would say you want to talk about his masters or students?
No, well, who did he learn from? Was he an apprentice on Busshi at the age of 30? Did he have to retrain to do Busshi when he was 30 and left behind his old profession?
Yes. He was doing two-dimensional art. Panel.
Okay.
He had to do a three-dimensional Buddhist sculptures. So there are masters in Kyoto called Sorin Matsuhisa and Hori Matsuhisa. Yeah, I cannot even say Japanese. So yes, these are legendary masters, and he wanted to learn from the best of the best.
Excellent.
So the Hori Matsuhisa is a father of Sorin Matsuhisa, and he in his lifetime he was said he did 5,000 or 8,000 Buddhist statues.
Wow.
But when people ask him about hey, you did so many statues, and he says, it's not the numbers, not important. I just did so many, so I don't care how many I did. So this kind of a incredible character.
Excellent. Well, okay, so then Korin Saito, the Grand Master of Busshi featured in the film, has a few apprentices who have become masters themselves. So tell me about those masters that you feature in the film.
Oh, that Master Koun, Master Koke, and all this, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Those people are the student of Master Saito. And again, initially, I was heard that they could not stand the training. Training is very strict. But slowly they realized there was a reason why training was very strict. And Master Saito yelled at them all the time because this is kind of tough love in Japanese culture. Often nowadays, Western people think, oh, this is too much, this is bullying, you gotta treat students with love and compassion, no yelling and bullying. I hear that all the time from everybody. But if you think differently, apprentices have a very short period of time to learn the craft, 3 to 5 years. And during that time, if they are not paying attention, if they are not working hard, if they don't master their craft, they won't be able to become a Busshi, professional Busshi. So masters often, they don't want to yell at them, yell at the students, and masters want to be nice to the students, but in order for for them to really care about the student, they have to be strict. So that's kind of culture that we are talking about.
Yeah, well, and in the film, the masters are quite hard on the apprentices, and I found myself thinking all of the exact things that you just mentioned. Like, wow, this is really hard work, and this seems cruel in some parts. But at the end, the masters do acknowledge the fantastic results that their team produces. The masters do show signs of, love throughout the film in between the hard pressures of training. And so, I noticed that where there's like a dynamic of like love in some parts, but then very hard, very strict training. Were you what did all of that seem very natural to you whenever you were watching it? Like, were you surprised at all by the strictness?
Well, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one way or another, we experience that in Japanese culture. But this particular culture is extreme. I recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, people in Japan do not really think this is something unique. This is an interesting thing. So when I show the film abroad, people get shocked.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is crazy, right?
Yeah, totally.
But for Japanese people, yeah, that's kind of normal in the craftsman's world. Yeah, I understand that. That's the reaction that people get. So I know that there's a movie called Jiro's Dream Sushi.
Yes, I love that movie.
Yes, that particular movie, people from Western world often say, oh, this was amazing how Jiro was so strict and he was so perfectionist and he's just an amazing artist and all this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for Japanese people, yeah, I'm sure there are people like that everywhere. That's kind of, this is
Yeah.
Yeah, so I find it very interesting. Of course, everybody respect Jiro. Of course, everybody respect Master Saito. But this old way of transmitting the knowledge to students is nothing new.
So interesting.
For Japanese people, so yes.
Well, and earlier you mentioned the difference between like some more Western cultures, which are a little more individualized, and Japanese culture, which is a little more collectivized. So teamwork among the Busshi sculpting team, the guild, seems to be of the utmost importance to accomplish and finish the very complicated pieces that you feature in the film. Tell me what you learned about the team dynamic, because it was so interesting seeing one person make the aura and one person make the hands and another person make the body. I mean, it's truly a team effort. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Often people say this is work of unke, kaike, like, for example, legendary Busshi for the ancient time. So, most of the Japanese people know unke and kaike. And, when they say this is work by unke and kaike, what they often mean is not only made by unke and kaike. It's made by his team. So, like in the documentary, I know that I don't want to spoil too much of the documentary, but Master says, oh yeah, if you do it by yourself, it's probably going to take a year.
Yeah.
But if you work together as a team, you can make it, let's say, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months.
Awesome.
So yes, the teamwork is very important. That's why masters. That's one of the reasons why masters take apprentices to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a win-win situation. Apprentices can learn from the masters, and masters can get a labor out of apprentices. But the thing is that you said this person work on hand, this person work on heads and all this, but it's not all one person working on certain things. It's not true conveyor belt style. So it's almost like sometimes this person work on head, sometimes this person work on legs. So there are stages of the making statues that only masters are allowed to do it, which we don't talk about so much because it's a more secret, right?
Excellent.
I mean, we talk about it in the movie a little bit, but so I hope you got the general idea.
Absolutely. Well, Yuji, this has been such a cool conversation. I love this opportunity of being able to see the film and then talk to you about it and then bring this amazing, craft into the awareness of all of the listeners of Classical Ideas. Can you just give people a sense of where to find you online if they want to go and discover some of the clips you have put out and things like that? Like, where can people find your work if they want to follow you?
Well, the best way to find me is www.carvingthedivine.com. There, you can be directed to many of the things that I worked on. You can find articles that I published. You can find trailers, and you can find a group that I created, Buddhist statuary discussion group, and you can find a blog about how to appreciate Buddhist statues, and even I have a study guide for you to study Buddhist statues. So if you once you go to the website, you can find all the information, and also, of course, my YouTube page, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and all the jazz.
Excellent. Well, Yujiro Seki, documentarian, filmmaker of the fabulous Carving the Divine, and creator and host of Carving the Divine TV. Thank you so much for taking time to come back on Classical Ideas and chat with me about your work. It's just a delight.
Thank you so much for having me. I know you're a very busy person, and it means a lot to me that you watch the whole Carving the Divine, and we finally had this discussion. Thank you so much.
Classical Ideas is produced by me, Greg Soden. Music on Classical Ideas is composed and performed by Derek Strybig. You can find his music at www.wearewarmmusic.com. If you like this show, please rate it on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email me at classicalideas@outlook.com or find me on Patreon at patreon.com/classicalideaspodcast. Thanks so much for listening.